How do you deal with the frustration of feeling like you're not getting it? For example, you're not understanding the terminology of a new exercise program, you're not remembering the moves. How long does it take to get it, and how long does it take to get results? Let's unpack and move backwards a little bit in terms of why this may be causing frustration. So if you go back to when you were a kid, your parents often determined which path you took. They would enroll you in piano lessons, they would enroll you in ballet, they would take you for swimming lessons. And whether you wanted to do these things or not, your parents would encourage you on this path because they wanted the best for you. We didn't necessarily get to choose what we did. Now, as soon as you get to maybe the mid-teens, when you start to choose your own paths, maybe you're starting to think about a career path, you're choosing your own electives at school, your own subjects, we tend to then go towards the things that we are good at, because it's human nature to do the things that we are good at because we enjoy them. If we enjoy something, we do more of it. If we do more of it, then we get better at it. And if we get better at it, then we enjoy it more. So you get this positive feedback loop. But it also starts to introduce this almost like a rich get rich, poorer get poorer sort of mentality, where the things that you're good at, you become really good at, and the things that you're not good at start to fall away. And this void opens up between your strengths and your weaknesses. Now, when we're kids and we're having the piano lessons and we're going to ballet and we're learning to play chess, our improvement curve is super steep. We learn a lot of information and we learn it very quickly. Now, as we start to stop challenging ourselves, this starts to level off a little bit more. There's not as much low-hanging fruit in skills that we can develop, in information that we can acquire. So we start to not learn as much, and we get used to this. We get used to living in our comfort zones, to being happy with the familiar, with our chosen field of study, with our chosen circle of friends, with our chosen career path. And we don't push the extremes. And of course, it's at the extremes, at the margins of our experience, where there is a potential for growth. But also at the margins of our experience, this is where there is a potential for maybe a bit of anxiety, a bit of stress, and a lot of frustration if we are pushing those boundaries, because we're not used to it. We're not used to this because we've weaned ourselves off it since we were kids. So if we can spend more time at the margins of our experience, but then also give ourselves permission to get frustrated sometimes. It's okay, it's allowed, it's normal. The problem sometimes stems from the fact that people think that there is something wrong with these feelings of frustration, something wrong with them not being able to do a skill. There's nothing wrong with it. We would do this multiple times a day as a kid. One of the main reasons that kids have tantrums at a certain age is because they are pushing their limits. They're right on the boundaries of their experience, and they get frustrated that they just don't get it. So it's okay. You're allowed to feel these emotions. You can push through. And if you do push through, this can lead us into a flow state. So all of the research on zones of optimal performance, you know, that state where time flies, you're not even aware of the passing of time. This is that flow state where everything just works. Maybe you're spending time with the family and suddenly the whole day has gone at the beach and you weren't even aware of the passing of time. Or you're engrossed in a project at school, in your study, at work, and time just flies. This is your flow state. Now, the precursor to a flow state is a state of struggle. And the research shows that you actually have to wade through this sticky struggle state to get to your flow. Most people stop before they get through it because it's uncomfortable and because it's frustrating, just like we're talking about here. But if you can stick with it and get through that state, that's the best way to hack your flow. The other big issue that comes along with the frustration is that people again are focusing on where they're trying to get to, and they're constantly focusing on that next marker on the road, that next point that they have to get to, and they're not focusing on where they've been. And sometimes they set these really big lofty goals, and their success is determined purely by whether or not they achieve this long-term, this distant outcome-based goal. Now, when you do achieve a goal, and goal setting is important, if you do achieve a goal, a big, scary outcome-based goal, you get this hit of dopamine, which is a chemical that's released in your body that makes you feel good. But what research tells us is that, let's say you can get a total of 100 dopamine. When you achieve this big goal, you get a big hit of 80 dopamine. So you get this big hit of lots of dopamine flooding your body. However, the research tells us that if you have 5 steps that lead up to this process, or this final outcome-based goal rather, each of those steps is going to give you a moderate-sized hit of dopamine. So maybe each of these 5 steps will give you 20 dopamine. So even though you've completed the same skill, the fact that you're ticking these little boxes as you go means that you've got 100 of these hits of dopamine from having these smaller process-based goals instead of one big massive hit of dopamine, but maybe only 80 dopamine if you're doing a big outcome-based goal. So set these little steps as you go, because if you can do that, if you can have these small steps and celebrate these small victories, not only will you be more focused on the present and on the difference between where you've been and where you are now, but it'll also make you happier in the long run. And in the end, if we're not happy, then we're not going to keep exercising and we're not going to stay healthy. You asked how long it takes to actually get there, how to actually arrive at your destination. When am I there? When have I done enough exercise? There is no point like that. Again, we're talking about a continuum here. You want to move just a little bit up that continuum. You will never get to the end of it, and that's not the point. The point is not to arrive. The point is to move towards that arrival, to move towards that destination. If you can do that, you're making progress. That's all we're looking for. You asked as well in this question how long it takes to get results. Well, it takes about 10 seconds. But it depends what sort of results you're talking about, because we can get these more acute, immediate, instant gratification results like improvements in blood flow and chemicals that are released into your body which improve your mood. These things happen in about 10 seconds. So you do get immediate results from exercise. But then of course we can look at more almost chronic, long-term, more delayed gratification impacts. And if we look at something on a super long time scale, maybe something like osteoporosis prevention. It takes a long time to add the load to our bones, to lay down more bone mineral density, to increase the density of our bones, and therefore hold off osteoporosis, low bone mineral density. But this is a long process. And the period in most people's lives, in a woman's life, where they're more able to lay down bone is that puberty, mid-teens, early 20s period. So you have girls who should be exercising, doing resistance-based exercise in their mid-teens and early 20s to work on osteoporosis prevention for when they're menopausal. And there are not a lot of girls at that age who are thinking about their bodies when they're 45, 50, 55, 60 years old. So these different types of benefits, these different improvements, and these different results from exercise happen at different times. So it's important to be able to focus on the ones that you're getting at that time, because that will help to feed back into your motivation to keep you going. But the problem is, as we achieve these things, so we exercise, we feel happier, but then we look for our next target. I want to lift this much weight, and then we do that, and then we go for the next target. And we don't celebrate these small wins. And this is called the hedonic treadmill. And it's this concept that as you achieve things, you want more, you want more, you want more. So let's say that you buy yourself a new big screen TV. You put it in the house, and a couple of weeks later you think, well, maybe I could have gone bigger. Maybe now I need a Netflix account to go with this. I need surround sound speakers. Now I need to upgrade to a curved TV. And you always want more. You always want a little bit more. Then you want a whole home theater system with recliner chairs. Then you need a popcorn machine and movie posters on the wall, and it gets carried away. It's exactly the same with exercise. If you keep chasing more and more and more and never stop to celebrate the small wins and stop to focus on where you are at that time, it can become a really difficult process. And this process comes from the fact that people perceive starting exercise in terms of motivation as needing the motivation first. So people think that, okay, I need to get motivated to exercise. Once I do, then I will exercise. And you get this cycle. And the perception that people have is that first you need to be able to do the exercise, so you can do. Then you need to be able to want to do that exercise, so you're motivated. And then and only then do you actually do that exercise. The problem with this is that these people are using motivation to try and drive their action. They're using their motivation to try and make them exercise, which is fine when motivation is high, but motivation comes in waves, it's up and down. Motivation will not always be high, so you cannot rely on it for exercise, because if you do, then you won't be consistent and you won't form habits. So instead of your action being driven by the motivation. We need to flip this flow chart around. We need to flip this process around and instead drive motivation from action. So if we make a start, even if it's not perfect, that's fine. But if we make a start, it shows us that we can do something. We start to become better at that thing. And then as soon as we become better at it, it's human nature to enjoy the things that we are good at. So we start doing more of them. And now this feedback loop is working for us. And instead of the engine of that feedback loop being a motivation, a drive to want to exercise, the engine of this feedback loop now becomes the exercise itself. And this becomes a much more long-term, sustainable type of motivation where it's driven by our action. If you can focus on these things instead of focusing on when am I going to arrive, when am I going to get there, when am I going to see the results, if you focus on that, the results will look after themselves and the results will drive your continued action.